So, Season 1 of Marvel Rivals just started and I'm really loving it. I'm having a ton of fun with the new maps and characters, and with this game's success, it's gotten me thinking what an equivalent could look like for the DC Comics universe. DC games haven't really been hitting the mark as of late, like with last year's Suicide Squad game, but the world of DC is so wide and varied, both with landmark cultural icons like Superman and Batman, but also lesser knowns that could easily fill out a 6v6 hero shooter and be the perfect project to kickstart a new era for DC games. And so this is how I would make DC Rivals. Listen, I did not expect to do another Marvel Rivals video yet, but yeah, I think I'm gonna double dip from that well. Marvel Rivals has an insane cast of 35 characters, with more being added every season. And so to try and do the same thing for DC, I need a way to easily organize all my ideas, which is why this video is brought to you by Notion. Most of the time when it comes to sponsors, you know, they reach out to me and then I try the thing out for a while and then I talk about it if I like it. That's not the case with Notion, because I've already been using Notion for years at this point. Notion is probably the most powerful tool I can think of when it comes to organization and creativity all in one singular app. Whether it be for content creation or daily tasks or personal projects, Notion is the perfect way to set and achieve your goals for 2025. For I think the past 3 years, I've been using Notion to organize and plan every single one of my videos. At first I started just writing scripts in it, but now I use it for taking notes and keeping track of my ideas and to-do lists. I literally have a calendar that shows like my video release dates alongside important events and movie release dates, so I kind of know what's going on with like the cultural zeitgeist. I had Craven in my Notion. I didn't even make a video about Craven. I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that Notion has genuinely changed my life, and I probably would say that even if they weren't sponsoring this video. There's so much to learn with the program, and their Notion marketplace has a huge variety of pre-made templates to get you started. My whole system is built on the back of Thomas Frank's Creator Companion that I customized to fit my workflow. And they just announced Notion Faces, which lets you create custom hand-drawn portraits to personalize your profile even more, especially when working in a team. They've really been leaning more and more into the aesthetics of everything and letting you do things to make your Notion page a genuine website with like emojis and layout customization. And Faces lets you go even further to truly make your page your own. They sent me cookies with the faces on them. I don't know why, but that's so much fun. Try Notion for free and create your portrait with Notion Faces using the link down in the description. Thanks to Notion for sponsoring this video, and thanks to my patrons who will get all my videos early and ad-free for just $1 a month. Now, DC actually has made a 6v6 hero shooter before, years before Marvel Rivals or even Overwatch. Gotham City Imposters was developed by Monolith Productions and released in 2012, and was a first-person 6v6 team shooter that was set in the DC universe. Except instead of playing as DC's iconic heroes, you played as some random guys. One team was a bunch of amateur vigilantes dressed as Batman, and the other was a team of criminals dressed as the Joker. Imposters, if you will. You could use gadgets like grappling hooks and gliders and roller skates and even build your own character. The game was not very popular. I mean, chances are you've never even heard of it. Not to mention it released right in the middle of the Batman Arkham era, so not many people were clamoring to play as a random guy in a bat costume when they could just be the guy in a bat costume. Servers were shut down in July of 2014, just 2 years after release, meaning that the game is effectively lost to the ages. Monolith would then go on to develop the Shadow of Mordor series and the upcoming Wonder Woman game that we still know nothing about. So DC's first foray into the team shooter genre wasn't really a hit. But what could a more traditional hero shooter in the same vein as Overwatch and Marvel Rivals look like for the DC universe? The first thing to think about when building this sort of game is how do we make it specific to DC? Now, you could just make it a reskin of Marvel Rivals. I mean, hell, half the cast would work for that. But despite being superhero worlds, there's enough to differentiate them and help make this game stand apart, and also like make this video a little more interesting. There are a lot of different things you could do. You could just amp the gameplay up to 11 and really showcase how powerful some of these characters are and make the maps huge. I'm picturing Metropolis or Gotham or even Apocalypse being these sprawling spaces with multiple objectives at once, which would let characters like Kryptonians or Speedsters have an advantage and get to the points faster. Maybe there could be like a weakness system where each character has a type and there's kind of like a Pokemon style rock, paper, scissors element to it. But that would get very complicated very fast and throw too much of a wrench into the style of competitive game, which is supposed to be simple. So instead, I think the best option would be to take what Marvel Rivals is doing with the team-ups and do something similar. But instead of just having a couple pairings that give different effects, focus the team-ups on the teams. You could still have your smaller team-ups like the world's finest, but imagine you have a team that fully consists of original Justice League members and you get rewarded with a boost in health or damage or maybe some extra moves for doing that. Or you could have a whole team of the Bat Family or the Teen Titans or the Legion of Doom or maybe even a full team of Lanterns. When it comes to the story, I like how Season 1 of Rivals is solely focused on the Fantastic Four, and the street level Marvel heroes fighting against Dracula and the vampires, and including newer comic elements like the Stark Sentinel. And so each season of DC Friends could do something similar and focus on a different side of the universe. If there is some kind of weakness mechanic, they could pull from Tower of Babel by Mark Waid and Howard Porter, where Batman's contingency plans for the Justice League got leaked and used against them. Except maybe it gets bigger and more cosmic than that. Maybe Darkseid gets a hold of them and creates an entirely new universe with that information, sort of like what he did to create the new Absolute Universe. Or we could just do Crisis for like the 50th time. I guess that works too. But alright, let's finally get talking about the roster. Starting with the big dogs themselves, DC's Trinity. The first being Superman. Superman to me seems like an obvious tank character. I mean, he's literally called the Man of Steel. I think it would be really fun if they made him like a flying tank, sort of like Iron Man floating in the skies and using his heat vision distracting the line of fire. Maybe they can make him a dive tank, give him a dive bomb like Venom or Captain America, and when he's on the ground, he becomes a melee fighter like the Hulk. He could use his ice breath to freeze people. And as a tank, I think it could be really fun if he had an ability that would shield his teammates from damage. Not with some magic spheres, but he literally rushes to them and wraps them around with his cape. And for his ultimate, you could just give him Doom Fist, where he just goes into the sky and slams into the ground. Or you could do something with the solar flare ability that was introduced in 2015. Next is Wonder Woman. For Diana, you could make her either a tank or a duelist. She's one of the greatest warriors in the DC universe, so duelist would make sense on paper. But as a tank, you could do some really fun stuff using her bracelets and defending your teammates. And maybe if you block enough, you could release that energy out into a shockwave. That's basically how she works in Multiverses, a game that only 6 people still play. And she's called a tank in that game, so fuck it, we're going tank. Her lasso could be just your regular hook type of pole, but maybe she could use it to throw people up into the air or even off of ledges, or maybe even as a grapple. In her ultimate, she could pull out her sword and shield and basically become a cross between Magic and Captain America. I know there's a lot of conversation about the sword and shield versus the lasso for Diana, and a lot of people have very strong opinions. Me personally, I prefer the lasso, so I'd want that to be her main moveset, but I still think there's room for the sword and shield so long as she's not, you know, cutting off heads and shit. And then we have Batman, the Caped Crusader, DC's golden boy who gets all the spotlight and has billions of fans around the world and will most definitely drive countless people to play this game. Make him a support. I'm serious, make him a strategist. There's been a lot of discourse lately about people insta-locking DPS characters in Marvel Rivals, especially in solo queue, and that leading to the whole team losing the match. And I get that it's frustrating, but if you ask me, that kind of just comes with this type of game. I don't think it's some malicious decision for people to fuck over all the healers. I mean, like, I played Overwatch in 2016, it was the same conversation. The reality is that characters like Spider-Man, Iron Man, Black Panther, and Punisher are just more popular. The game is free to play, so there are going to be a lot of casual players, and if you have Spider-Man in a game, you're going to have people who just want to play as Spider-Man. And so the solution to that is to put those super popular characters like Batman in the strategist role. At first, it would make sense to make Batman a duelist. You know, you could just copy the moveset from Moon Knight and you're good. But Batman, above all else, is a master detective and strategist, so it honestly kind of makes sense. You could still give him that same kind of mobility. He could grapple and glide around and even throw batarangs, but maybe his other abilities use his tech to heal his teammates and control the battlefield instead of purely just doing damage. You know, make him sort of like a mix between Moon Knight and Adam Warlock. Also, I'm sorry, it would just be very funny to see Batman fans have to play healer. When it comes to the rest of the Justice League, I could see Green Lantern being a really fun tank character. You could give him a big Reinhardt shield and put bubbles around his teammates. What might be kind of cool is maybe he starts with a lot of construct armor on him and he's this big bulky tank, but then as he takes damage, those pieces break off and he gets smaller but more mobility. And his ultimate could supercharge him with the lantern and make him even tankier. I would definitely want to see multiple Green Lanterns on the roster. Games like Injustice always make characters like Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart swappable skins, but they all have such different personalities and that applies to their constructs. John was an architect in the military, whereas someone like Kyle Rayner is an artist, and Simon Baz has a gun. Or had a gun. I think he got rid of it. For the Flash, I think it would be really fun to treat him sort of like Spider-Man, a duelist character with a really high skill floor, but the potential to do a lot of damage in the right hands, especially in the backline and picking off healers. He could throw lightning, maybe he has abilities that use the Speed Force to slow enemies down, like that one move from Injustice, or is able to give his team a bit of a movement boost, sort of like Jeff's Bubbles or Storm. I thought about making him a support for the same reason as Batman, and it would be really fun if he could like heal people by running to the nearest health pack and bringing it back to them. So maybe he has like a getaway move that he can do, and that's like on a really long cooldown for that. I always prefer Wally West as a Flash, but they could have a lot of fun with the costumes, having some skins with entirely different voice lines, like the Premier skins from Injustice, which I'd love to see in Rivals. Like, it'd be really fun to play as Barry or Jay or even Reverse Flash. Although I think I would become the most toxic person in the planet if I could play as Eobarthon, so maybe not. Like, I would bully everybody on that team. One of my favorite DC characters and someone that I'll always try to put in any roster I can, and that's Black Canary. Depending on who you ask, Dinah Laurel Lance is one of the best hand-to-hand fighters in the DC universe. Definitely have a power scaling conversation in the comments, that always goes well, but she could be a really fun brawler type of character in the similar vein to Iron Fist. You could give her like a little flip that lets her dodge attacks like Star-Lord, and maybe her Canary Cry could have different effects depending on the pitch. One that does damage, one that stuns, and another that launches you back. And you know I can't talk about Canary without bringing in my boy, Green Arrow. I was originally gonna say that that he and Canary should be like a dual slot, like Cloak and Dagger. But then I realized a character that could switch between Hawkeye and Iron Fist would make people shoot me down in the street, so maybe not. During the last season, Hawkeye was one of the most powerful and hated characters in the community, and while he got slightly tuned for this season, it wasn't the massive nerf that some people were hoping for. Personally, I'm glad about that. One, because I like playing Hawkeye, but also I don't want to see rivals adopt the Overwatch method of nerfing everybody until it's not fun anymore. Like, a big part of these games is learning and adapting, and instantly nerfing everything just is not the way to go, in my opinion. But I do still get that the Hanzo Archer type of character can be frustrating, especially getting one-shotted from across the map, and so I think I found the solution. Make him a support. He's got healing arrows. They do like a little bit of area of effect. And fuck it, maybe headshots do double the healing. You know, give him those, give him a boxing glove arrow, and for his ultimate, he cooks a big pot of chili that heals your team and does damage to the enemy because it's too spicy. Seriously, like, making somebody a support is just as easy as saying, all right, whatever, give him healing. Well, who cares? It doesn't have to make sense. Rocket Raccoon is not a healer. Green Arrow and Black Canary, of course, need a team up of some kind. Maybe she could like charge his arrows or something like that. I don't know. And if the Green Lantern in this game is Hal Jordan, maybe the two of them could ditch the match altogether and go on a road trip where he teaches them about the struggles of the working class. As for other Justice League members, you could also have Hawkgirl be a duelist. John Constantine could be a really fun to be like a lifesteal support type of character. Martian Manhunter could also be a really fun strategist that could like no-clip through walls and copy people's abilities. Aquaman could be a Namor clone, or he could lean into his durability and make him a tank. And Mr. Terrific could be a support character with different T-spheres having different effects and healing. If Batman is going to be a strategist for this game, I think that Robin should be a duelist. You could go with Dick Grayson, but I always prefer to see him as Nightwing instead. Tim is always a safe pick since he's personally my favorite Robin, but I think Damian Wayne could have a lot of really fun potential in a game like this. He could use his bird-a-rings and also his sword and jump around. Damian is someone who struggled a lot initially to be part of a team and really kind of fends for himself, so it might be fun if his gameplay and his abilities reflect that. He could borrow some of the Lazarus Pit from his grandfather and drop a pod down that heals himself and other teammates, sort of like Soldier 76. Really let him be that solo duelist, like, dream character, you know? And for his ultimate, he could call in Goliath, his pet dragon, and ride him around and smack some people. While we're on the topic of Teen Titans characters, I'm sort of 50-50 on whether or not Cyborg should be a strategist or a tank, and same for Raven. Cyborg looks the part, being the big beefy guy of the Titans and the Justice League, but he could do some really fun stuff using his tech to heal people, and maybe he sort of like hacks health packs like Sombra. And Raven is the one who can literally make force fields, so she also makes sense to be a tank. I'm a big believer that the label of the roles aren't necessarily as important as how the character is used. Like when Sue Storm was revealed, I saw a lot of people mad that she wasn't a tank despite her powers being force fields. But we learned on release that she has the ability to make giant shields for characters that even heal you. That blurring of the roles, especially once you throw in team ups into the mix, is part of the reason why I'm having so much fun with Rivals and why I don't want it to become that restrictive, especially with something like a role queue. And then you have Starfire, who could be a really fun duelist, or Beast Boy, who could make a really fun tank, like switching between animals. And if Wonder Woman's gonna be a tank and if Green Arrow is gonna be a strategist, then Donna Troy and Roy Harper could both be duelists. They're not explicitly Teen Titans members, but Supergirl could also be a really fun duelist compared to Superman's tankiness. Blue Beetle could go either way for me. Duelist makes sense because he can like generate different weapons, but you could also do some fun stuff with a Scarab armor and make him more of a tank. Cassandra Cain needs to be in there as a duelist. And you know what? Throw in Red Hood for the Punisher mains out there. Don't say I never did anything for you, but make him a support. I'm kidding. That was a joke. That one was a joke. I've said it before, but there's one thing that Marvel Rivals is seriously lacking in, and that's villains. Literally the name Rivals. There aren't that many rivals in a game called Marvel Rivals. The only straight up villain on the roster is Hela. Characters like Loki, Venom, and Magneto don't really count and haven't for decades at this point. But DC has such a wide array of amazing villains at their disposal. Pretty much every character has an entire catalog of rogues. And I'd want this game to pull heavily from that. With the first being Joker. Listen, I'm sick of the Joker. I'm tired of DC shoehorning him into everything like the Suicide Squad game and Injustice, despite the fact that he has no business being there. Not only does he not really fit the types of games, but he's literally canonically dead in both of them. And just in general, there's always been such an oversaturation of Joker in all DC media, and it finally feels like we're getting away from that, and I don't want to return to the Dark Ages. But David Zaslav has a gun pointed at my head and he says if I don't do it, he's gonna cancel another Batgirl movie. Joker could be a really fun strategist type of character, except not in a healer type of way, but more in a chaotic asshole for the other team and maybe kind of your own team kind of way. He could leave traps and bombs around the map, launch people away from the objective, and stun people using his Joker toxin. He wouldn't be very good at getting kills, but he could just make life so much harder for everyone else involved, which is very on brand for Joker. Another fun duelist could be Lex Luthor. He could be your Resident Diva or Penny Parker type of character where he's in a big mech, but then when he dies, he turns into a little guy with a gun. Because that's all Lex Luthor is, really, at the end of the day. He's a little bald man with a gun, right? There's nothing to him. Maybe he could work like Wolverine and his damage is based on a percentage of max health. At first, everybody thought that Wolverine was the worst character in the game. Now a lot of people are seeing his role as a tank buster, and that's been a lot of fun. And so if Superman is that flying tank, then Lex could be the anti-Superman pick. Maybe he could shred through his health and his shields and maybe even have anti-air abilities that knocks him and other flyers out of the sky. Similarly, Captain Cold could have a lot of CC moves to stop speedsters like the Flash. He could freeze people, slick the ground to make his team move faster, but also slow down the enemy. You could just make him a strategist and say his cold gun also heals like Luna Snow. And for his ultimate, maybe he could do something like May where he creates a big blizzard that freezes everybody. Or fuck it, maybe he just does a little K-pop dance and heals everybody. Doomsday would be a really fun tank. His whole thing is getting more powerful and durable with every fight, and so maybe each time he dies, he comes back with a little bit more health. And maybe his design changes a little bit each time too, getting more spikes and armor. And if there's destructible environments like in Marvel Rivals, it could be really cool if he's able to pick up those pieces of rubble and throw them at people. As for other villains, Cersei could be either a duelist or a strategist. Atrocitus could be a really fun tank. Destro could be a fun duelist so long as you keep him away from any schools. And I really love to see Count Vertigo get more spotlight. He's one of my favorite Green Arrow villains and he never seems to get the credit he deserves because that's been my favorite aspect of Marvel Rivals. It would have been really easy to just take the cast of the movies and all the A-listers and throw them into a game and call it a day. But instead, developer NetEase is pulling from some lesser known elements from the comics with its roster. Characters like Magic and Squirrel Girl and even Jeff the Landshark are now essentially household names purely because of this game, and that's really exciting. And I'd want to see something similar with DC. We're getting Crypto finally in the movies, but I'd also want to see Detective Chimp and Dex Star, other Lanterns characters like Larfleeze and Saint Walker. There's your iconic Batman villains like Two Crow and Scareface, but what about the wacky ones like Crazy Quilt and the Penny Plunderer? We could have a whole season devoted to the Doom Patrol like we are with the Fantastic Four. I'm gonna need them to figure out how to make Danny the Street a playable character. I don't care what it takes. I need it to happen. In some ways, it's kind of worrying for your underground, hyper niche favorite character to suddenly become a cultural icon and all the mischaracterization that comes with that. But at the same time, it's opening up the floodgates for people to get interested in the world of comics and reading these stories, which if you ask me, is the most important part. As of late, DC's gaming catalog hasn't hit the same highs that it used to. They have this huge library of characters and stories just waiting to be explored in the medium, but right now it feels like they're not fully tapping into it. The new Arkham VR game was great, but Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad fizzled out, and Multiverses was supposed to be WB's answer to Fortnite before they came crawling back with more DC skins. Use creator code TroyBoy17, by the way, please. It genuinely does help. But we still don't have a Superman game after all these years, or a Flash game. Hell, I'll even take a new Injustice at this point. And that Monolith Wonder Woman game is nowhere to be seen. Seriously, it's been 3 years. I'm worried. Is she okay? For years, the Arkham series elevated DC games from just games about Batman into cultural landmarks. And it's kind of disappointing to see it fallen so far thanks entirely to shitty decisions from WB, whereas Marvel is succeeding in that very same space, not just with Marvel Rivals, but also with Insomniac's Spider-Man. Things very well might be changing with James Gunn's DCU, which is supposed to connect film and TV and video games together, but I hope we're still able to get side projects in the same vein as Rivals. Not just because I want to play Overwatch as Superman, but also to kick these characters back into the limelight that they deserve. But what do you want to see in a DC Rivals type of game? What are some characters that I missed that you think should be included? If you like this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Special thanks to Elijah Wakefield, also The Sting, Andrew Berg, Ans, Aaron Peterson, Axu, Cabbage Boy, Cassidy, Calvin Brown, Carolyn Brenneman, Chicken McDoofus, Dan, Danny Boy, Eden Kenna, Egan McFarlane, Evan Bowers, Fastest Man Dead, Finn Yates, Gavin, Hannah C, Harper Sires, Howard Bell, If You Know You Know, Iron Ninja, Jake Selig, Kai Dud, Ken, Leo Stringer, Mauricio Silva, Melody Dreamer, Glassbear Productions, Morpy, Mr. Game 959, Popcorn Eater 123, Raptor 77, Rocco Awad, Rylan Archuleta, Spectacular Clyde, Tafari, TDW Fan, Theo Crouch, Finn Neufeld, Tom 14, Trenton Cole, Troy Aspirators Lame, and Yush Kapoor for being spectacular fanboys on my Patreon. This has been TroyBoy17 coming at you live. Stay safe, everybody, and I will see you around.